Hello, this is Coach Tim Campbell, and I'm your host for the Self-Made as a Myth, Make a Difference Together show, where we're talking with successful business owners to hear their stories of building their business. And because we know that success in business is not something that we can do on our own, we recognize the folks who have helped us to excel. Today, I'm excited to have a fellow business owner from Indiana with us today. My guest views managing in the business world similar to coaching and likes to use coaching analogies, which I'm sure we will hear later today. One thing he enjoys doing in his downtime is playing and coaching soccer, and he is most proud of his family. It's my pleasure to welcome Joe to the show today. Hey, Joe, how are you?
Wonderful, Tim. Thank you for having me on today.
Awesome. Well, hey, let's start with having you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit of your personal story, like where you were born and live, and about your family and some of your hobbies.
I was born in a suburb of Dayton, Ohio. Grew up there with my mom and dad and sister. Um, School teacher, choir director, family as we grew up. And I went to Purdue for college, played soccer there, was in a fraternity, mechanical engineering degree from Purdue. Um, I currently reside on the north side of Indianapolis with my wife, have a son that is going to IU, which he forever continues to tell me how much better IU is than Purdue. Um, and I'll say I'm currently running a business called iAIRE.
Awesome. And what's your wife's name?
Sue.
Wonderful. And Joe, is there a funny story that your family likes to tell about you that you'd be willing to share with us today?
Not so sure about my family, but a lot of my friends, especially as we said, I played and coached a lot of soccer. But it was funny, it comes in even to talking about communication a little bit. So when I was playing in college, I had a hard time. I played on defense in the back, and there was another Joe that was right beside me all the time. So you think about talking and people are yelling names all the time, right? We're in the same part of the field and they're yelling. We go down to play Western Kentucky University, and I got introduced. The guy did some kind of funky announcing all the time on people's names, and I got introduced as Yuri Wolfgang Tinkman during that game. So from that point on in my sophomore year, the rest of the way through college, and even to some of those people I still see from now time to time, I'm still Yuri to all of those people as opposed to anybody else. And the amazing thing is it actually solves some communication problems on the field because he was Joe and I was Yuri. And it stopped any of that potential communication problem happening, even though it was somewhat funny and it's still kind of a joke with everybody around when that happens, that I was still Yuri. It was funny that just that little bit of difference made an awful lot of difference communicating because now we knew specifically who everybody was talking about when it was out there on the field.
That's awesome. So Joe, tell us how the business came about, and at what point did you have the confidence that you could run your own business?
Um, when you say have the confidence to run your own business, I think every day you wonder whether you have the confidence to run.
Yeah.
And that goes back and forth. So this isn't the first business I've started, and I would still say that's a struggle every day you go through, right? As things change, I'll say the culture out there changes, right? I mean, today is dramatically different between COVID and kind of part shortages in the world than it was 2 years ago, right? As a business owner, you're constantly challenged by different stuff. And I think you always wonder, are you good enough to handle whatever is coming at you? Because it's never the same. And I think that's kind of the biggest thing that you have to figure out and determine is, right, are you ready to handle that? Because that's probably the hardest part is there is a lot to be said that you are sitting there at the top somewhat on your own. At the end of the day, you're going to make decisions, right? Most of the time with input from lots of other people, but you're going to make a decision that is either better or worse, and you have to live with that. And there's not going to be a lot of people that feel sorry for you, right? Because they all think you have the greatest job in the world and can do what you want when you want. And but the answer is yes, there's a lot of times you question yourself all the time, and it doesn't matter how small or big your business is. That is a constant scenario. So when you say, ask me, gosh, do I feel like, what is it? I go every day, I question, do I have all the right things, right? It's part of why having a business coach like yourself and right? I have one too, right? To try and help make you better and make you more prepared for what's coming at you. I'm not sure I feel any day like I'm completely prepared for everything that's there. You just hope that you can work on it well enough, find the right people to get input from to make the best decisions you can to keep yourself moving forward.
I love that perspective. You mentioned the idea that it's lonely at the top. I hear that a lot, that we don't feel like we have people that we can turn to and talk to, and that people are always judging us. And a lot of folks tell me we don't want to take it home because we don't want to burden our family. So that can be incredibly overwhelming to feel that way. And so having others in our life to be able to reach out to and talk things out loud is so critically important. And you mentioned the coach. I have a coach as well, and I have a couple coaches because there's so much going on and stuff that gets stuck in our head that we just can't. It's not healthy to hold that all inside and not have somebody to work through it with. Right.
Yep. I think one of the most important things you wind up needing is to understand what you don't know and how to go find people that can help you understand what you don't know, right? Mm-hmm. Most business people, right, or people running their business get there because they were good at doing something, right? That's usually how it starts, right? You were good at doing something, and all of a sudden you're now running a business and you're making decisions about things that you probably never even thought of in your life, right? And so you have to somehow again learn, right? Whether that's to find the right people who can take care of those things for you, right? Or learn how to do them yourself. Yeah. But you get thrust right back in immediately into trying to figure out where that is. And back to your comment about you don't do it alone, right? You can't possibly learn how to do all the things you have to do well, or your business has to do well as a business owner. And I think that's one of the hardest things for people to understand, right? That guy, my goodness, I was great at doing this. And all of a sudden, running a business probably necessarily isn't about what you were great at doing before. How do you learn those things? How do you rationalize in your own mind, right? Either letting people decide or making those decisions, and educating yourself about how to do it is, to me, one of the hardest things to do, which is why I say me every day is almost a learning process, because the environment you're executing in is different. And you have to be able to an extent, adapt and figure out the best ways to move through those. And who are your mentors? Who are your coaches? Where do you go to for those things that you need are probably some of the most critical things you do every day.
Yeah. There's a great book out there, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, by Marshall. I can't remember his last name off the top of my head, but it's that same premise, right? Of the hustle and grind that we all had to start with in building our companies and doing the do and making things work will only get us so far. And then we have to turn more to, how do I scale the company, right? How do I empower others and delegate and let go and allow the company to grow beyond my own capacity?
Which is usually getting your own self out of the way to let that happen.
Indeed. Yes, for sure. So tell us more about the company, Joe. What's the name and what do you guys do? How do you help others? And for folks listening, how can they learn more about you?
My business name is iAIRE, iAIRE. So we got started actually on a patent I had about commercial buildings. You're required to bring outside air in, keep sick building syndrome from happening. And outside air tends to be the most expensive thing in the HVAC world you do. When it's really cold, you got to heat it up to building temperature. When it's hot, you got to cool it down. You have to dehumidify it. And so if you can bring in less air, you actually can have utility savings, but the less air you bring in has the potential to make the air not as clean. And so came up with some patented technology that helped allow you to actively clean the air, allowing you to bring less air in and having both cleaner air in the space. And so the company got started kind of around the equipment that does that. And we have grown into making a lot of other HVAC equipment, primarily around indoor air quality and utility savings. We now currently have one of the, I'll say, most efficient HVAC equipment in the world. We make a solar HVAC unit that's kind of 2 to 3 times more efficient than what's out there in the world, almost in any other format. And so we are trying to get this technology put onto pretty much every different kind of HVAC equipment that's out there, trying to just help make it a whole lot more efficient to run HVAC, kind of with what's going on with the solar energy, out of what's out there, and just cut a lot of the energy consumption out of HVAC is what our business is doing.
Fantastic. And if folks listening to this would like to learn more, how can they get in touch with you, or where can they go to your website or something like that?
Our website is myiaire.com. So myiaire.com.
Awesome.
And you'll get numbers or contact us if you see anything you'd like to see there on the page. You can get access to us through our website.
Awesome. So we'll make sure to include that along with this video. Joe, share us a story where someone pushed you or inspired you that you could do it, even though you may not have thought you could, and what the impact that person had on you and your business journey.
It's really interesting. I met a gentleman by the name of David Bosman, actually coaching his daughter in soccer. And he was a small businessman himself. He had a company, and he distributed primarily fasteners kind of all around the state of Indiana, screws, bolts, rivets, all that kind of stuff to industrial and commercial clients all around the state. And we got talking. He wound up, kind of as I coached both his daughters, talking about his business, even talked briefly about potentially going into business with him and doing some stuff. I was, I'll say, reasonably young at that point in time, right? And I always at that point in time felt like I just wasn't old enough to run and or manage, I'm going to say whatever that was, right? I always felt like, oh my gosh, who's going to listen to a 27, 30-year-old when you sit down and start talking about stuff? And Dave and I wound up starting another little business together, and just in general was one of the most positive people I've ever been, going, age doesn't matter, right? What you know, who you're able to convince, right? And another thing he taught me was that I always thought at that point in time, selling was this bad thing. You were convincing people to do things they didn't want to do.
Yeah.
And that kind of the combination of both, it doesn't matter your age, right? Whatever it is, right? People will be drawn if you have an understanding of what needs to happen, regardless of your age or who you are or what sex you are, any of the above, right? If you have good ideas and whatever, you need to get them out there. And two, that selling wasn't really bad, that almost everything you do, right? Talking to your wife and convincing her you want to go to this restaurant as opposed to that one is, in an essence, selling what's happening, right? Convincing people you want to design it different is, in essence, a form of selling. And selling done right isn't this bad thing. It's actually this really noble thing of exchanging ideas and getting people to a common ground. And just kind of constantly over, I'll say all the way until he passed away a couple of years ago, to me was a mentor talking about business, and more than anything else, just being phenomenally positive about, right, you know enough, go out there and go do it. And obviously, yes, there are ramifications to your decisions, but yes, you probably know and can do the things you want. And just a phenomenally great person in my life, helping me move myself forward in whatever those things were.
I love that perspective of selling, because we've all had bad experiences with salespeople, and a lot of folks I talk to have that internal impression of, well, I don't want to be like that. So
right,
that perspective is awesome. Of another way of coining it is, professionally helping people to make a decision that's right for them. Right?
Yes.
And so when you come at it from that perspective, it's like, hey, if the answer is no, right, that's great, because
yes,
we've helped people to decide, if our solution is right for them or not. And if it's not, no harm, no foul, right? We move on to the next person.
Yep.
Right. So Joe, what's your biggest learning as a business owner over the years?
The biggest thing I've learned, that usually the problem is in the mirror. I can normally look in the mirror and realize that I'm normally the problem to almost whatever's going on. I'm normally the problem, right? My lack of knowledge, my lack of allowing other people to do it, right? A decision I've made, right? Not putting enough energy. Usually, right, the problem is I can look at it in the mirror and realize it's a shortcoming that I had in myself, or I allowed things to not go right or whatever. That normally the problem isn't somewhere else. Normally I should be able to look in the mirror ultimately and realize the problem is me. It's not, right? Because today is a great example, right? There's a part shortage, there's a labor shortage, right? Inflation is going up. There's always some external force, and to be honest, you can't control most of those,
Right. Yeah.
right? And nobody in any business is able to control all of those, right? But that's what you're supposed to be doing running your business, is controlling the things that you can control and doing the things that you can do to make it better for your customers, your employees, right, and your business. And normally that means you've got to look at what you can do and make the decisions around you can. And most of the time, I'll say it's been not making decisions that I probably should have made that's been the biggest issue, right? At some point, that's really what you've got to do. And I'll say that's the biggest thing I realized, is it's not somebody else causing me problems normally. It's I'm not doing something that I probably should be to make it better, is normally the answer to what's going on with if it's not going right.
The awesome thing about that, so insightful, is if we give away our power by saying it's always somebody else, then we have absolutely nothing that we can do about it, right? We've actually stuck ourselves in I can't do anything. So your perspective is awesome in that, hey, if it is all on me, if it's something that I've done or haven't done, then I have the ability to make a difference and make a different decision or take a different action. And therefore, I've just gained back my control over whatever this problem or challenge or ultimate outcome that I want in the business is. Now I have the ability to control it, versus the folks who just, duck their head in the sand and say, oh, there's a labor shortage, nothing I can do about it. Or, oh, supply chain problems, nothing I can do about it. So it's awesome perspective, Joe. I appreciate you sharing that.
It doesn't make it any necessarily easier, right? It just, like you said, you realize that you're not complete. It's not that you have no control over the situation. There's always things you can do. That doesn't always make them better, right? But it doesn't mean that you don't have anything that you can do to combat what's going on. And once you start to realize, just like you said, that there's always a few things in your control that you can do, it, to me, starts to make you move forward, right? There's always actions you can take, right? And then you just have to be smart enough to, when you do the actions, understand, did it make it better or worse? And then start to correct around whatever it is you're doing, because usually once you start moving, and as long as you're willing to look at yourself and determine, hey, that was maybe a bad decision, right? We may be going the wrong way. Let's at least change it. Yeah. But you tend to then start moving forward, and hopefully in the positive direction for your company and your customers and all that as you move yourself forward.
Yeah, it's awesome. So Joe, we know that business success doesn't happen in isolation. So tell us about a challenge you've had over the years and a fellow business owner that came alongside you and helped you through it.
I'll say really starting iAIRE up was one of them. I have a partner today in the business that kind of put a little money and helped start in. And, he was, probably 15, 20 years older than I am. So had owned multiple businesses prior to it. And so there is a perspective, and I'll say from him and watching him, that especially when I started this, to me, did a much better job at, I will say, getting out of everybody else's way than what I did when, I'll say, I started at iAIRE. That was like, okay, if you can get the right people who know what they're doing with some direction, right, let them go do the work, and you don't have to be quite so overbearing in what's there. And that doesn't absolve you of making sure the end results are right and doing some follow-up, but it also means you don't have to do the work and ride herd on them probably as much as I did when I first started in some of that format. And so just watching that scenario, and as I would say too, he did a much better job than even I did of bringing other people in to help, right? Hey, I might not know this at all. Let's go bring other people in to help look, analyze what's going on, was very, very helpful on watching things happen. I'll say another person way younger, right? As I kind of got done with school and everything, right? Um, Actually, one of the good friends of my parents that was an architect, and I kind of was getting done at Purdue, and I took the kind of first stage of the PE test, and I had co-op for GM and was working for Frito-Lay, and was telling him, I don't see any reason why I need to get a professional engineering license. I don't, I'm not using it at work at all. Why do I need to do it? And he's like, I think you ought to reconsider it. He's like, I bet you won't use it for 15 years.
Hmm.
He's like, but there'll be a time in your life. And he's like, when you start looking out past the next 2 or 3 years, right? If you look at things in a longer term, he's like, you start to put a different priority on some of the things that are happening when you start to widen your horizon out. And he's like, you're right. You're probably right. You may not need to use that thing for the next 15 years, but if you wait 15 years, you probably won't remember enough or do enough work to get the rest of the way through.
Right.
And he said, I would tell you, one, go get it, and always look out at a longer horizon than you think you will. And he's like, it will change your view of what's there.
Yeah.
I always kind of remember what Don Porter said with that. And it wasn't right at the time. It didn't seem like a whole lot. It wasn't even, I wasn't even thinking about somebody was imparting some really important information that was there that to me, again, has been very powerful because, right, most of the days you're fighting just to struggle and get through the day. And right, the more you run the business, the farther out you can look. What to me is interesting, it seems like the more successful you wind up being, the farther you are as the owner that you can look out. And it is hard. It's the hardest thing you do, right? Is to get yourself out of the day to day or even the week to week to look farther and farther ahead. But what happens to your business, the farther out that you can look and the farther out you can plan around, is just amazing what happens when you start to look at those things.
It reminds me of Stephen Covey's principle of begin with the end in mind, right? So if we can look at what does our business, envision what our business looks like when it's done and what year it's done and what's the revenue and the profit and how many employees, it gives us that goal, right, of what we're working towards. And then we can step backwards and say, okay, well then now what does that mean in 2 years from now or 1 year from now and this quarter and this month? And we can evaluate those shorter term decisions based on, do I feel like this is in line with my long-term vision for the company? And is this decision going to be right for that ultimate goal? And to your point, we're not going to know everything in terms of, is it exactly in line with it, but it gives us an ability to say, yeah, that decision there is short term, and that's not going to be in the best interest for the business overall.
Well, you also tend to find, right, when you're in the middle of fighting a fire, it seems like there's only one means to walk that path.
Yeah.
When it becomes a longer process, you start to see there's probably more paths that get you to the end game than just one. There's probably not just one path that gets you there. And it's hard to do that when you're in the middle of, like I said, the day-to-day struggles. It's just hard to see you are where you are, and it seems like there's only one way to go move and do that. And when you do get a chance, as I always say, to pick up your head and start looking a little farther forward, it does help you sometimes realize, yes, there's not just one path to that end goal. And it might not even be the one you thought it was that gets you there, but you're still progressing towards your real end game, not just the short-term thing that you think is so important.
Yes. I like what you just said. It might not even be the thing that you thought was the right decision. So I've had, I'm sure everybody can relate to this, right? I've had situations where, a client has decided to leave, and, it feels devastating. And then, my coach will say, yeah, but Tim, what if that's freeing you up for the next, better client or a bigger client, or, or your own self growth and development? It's like, yeah, okay. So long term, right, to your point, Joe, if some of those short term pains are not necessarily bad things in terms of the long term perspective and growth and development of us as individuals or the company.
Yep.
So, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
So Joe, if I asked you to pick 3 people in your business journey that you're most grateful for being there as part of your success, who are those 3 people, and how did they help you?
I'll say the first one, and again, I didn't give him a lot of credit at the time, was my girlfriend's father in high school. So while I was still a high school student, he was an executive for a division of General Motors. And I didn't really understand at the time, but he was the general manufacturing manager. So the plant manager at like 12 plants around the world reported to him. But when I was still a high school student, he actually got me in, and I was working in the engineering labs for General Motors. So even prior to starting school, and again, then when I started to co-op, well, heck, I'd already done jobs co-ops did when I was interviewing for co-ops. And coming out of Purdue again, I had a brief 2.5 years on the job at GM. I didn't talk to a single person interviewing about what classes I took or anything else. I talked about job experiences and even knew there were things I did and didn't want to do. And I go, had he not gone out of his way to get me a job, right? And yeah, it started at minimum wage in an engineering lab, but it progressed its way through. And I had, I'll say, an advantage over pretty much my peers at the same age all the time, because I had in every instance more real world experience than they did when I was talking to people about what was going on. That was phenomenally helpful. It just set me ahead of everybody else for doing something, I'll say probably nice for his daughter's boyfriend, but it was phenomenally helpful to me, right, in that format.
Awesome.
And
And
I
what was
talked,
his name?
his name was Jerry Meyer.
Awesome.
And then I talked a little bit about David Bosman too, right? He was one of the other ones that I go, every day was to me positive, right? About everything he did and was helpful and about going through it. Again, another person I give an awful lot of credit to for what I'm doing. And I'll say again, kind of as I talked to about my partner even today, right? This business wouldn't exist without him, right? The time and the money he's put in, we wouldn't be here doing this without him being around. And so those are probably the three people that I would talk the most about what they were doing and how they've helped me, do things and get to where I'm at with what's going on today.
Awesome. And what's your partner's name?
Gary Collin.
Awesome. Fantastic. So, Joe, as you think about the next 3 to 5 years, what are the biggest challenges you see in achieving your goals, and who are the types of people you're going to need in your life and in your business to help you solve those?
Well, I'll say, in talking about in particular, I said a little bit, our business has solar HVAC. I actually believe it is probably one of the biggest things that can help as people talk about global warming or anything else. And how do you shed utility cost? There hasn't been anything in the HVAC industry kind of since Carrier first created, heating and air conditioning, in that format, that has the ability to save the amount of money and energy that this does, right? I mean, the industry has constantly pushed to get more efficient and everything over time. And we're typically taking 10, 15, 20% increments as that goes. Talking about being able to get 2 to 3 times as efficient as we are today are something that nobody's been able to talk about. Plus, when you not only do that, but you add the piece in that makes this solar, and you have the ability to use other types of means to shed some of that load. And the way that it's done, adding to it, HVAC equipment doesn't travel well from country to country, predominantly because everybody has a different voltage, different phasing. So you can't use equipment in the US necessarily in the rest of the world, or China over here. This allows you to potentially go anywhere. So it's the first time I've literally thought about having something that potentially has international appeal and flair. And so you now start talking about, my gosh, scaling not just inside of the US, but how do you potentially go outside and, talk about raising money to extent I would have never dreamed of, and the size and scope. And I go, yeah, I can see this being, hundreds of millions or billions of dollars. And I look at the size I am today and think of those numbers and go, my gosh, they almost seem almost funny and unreal when you start talking about doing that. And so I go, kind of back to myself when I look at, my gosh, am I ready to manage something that is that much larger in scope? Or even do I understand the pieces and people I need, because raising money or getting funding to do things on that size and scale, and talk about plants, the size and scale. I go, am I ready for, do I know the people I need to bring in? And am I just ready myself is one of the biggest things I ask. Am I capable of growing and attracting the right talent to help this go do those things? And the answer is, like normal, I don't know. You start figuring out the things and finding the people that can help you do the things that you don't, and attract the people you do. And so I go, yes, there's lots of things. In particular, I've never even thought about all of the financial side, not so much about profit and loss, but you can't grow without an infusion of cash that continues to go as you do it. And those just aren't things I've ever thought about. So I'll say those are the things I wonder about is, can I get the right people? Can you attract the people that you need to develop a business that's of that size and scope? I'll say those are all the things that I wonder, are we capable of doing and executing?
What an exciting next few years, Joe. That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
So Jim Rohn is one of my favorite authors, and a quote from him is, "We become the average of the 5 people that we spend the most time with." So as you think about that, is that something that is exciting, something that makes you nervous from a business standpoint?
I think in some ways I'm blessed with some of the people that are around me just by default that I don't think about. My wife is actually a city council person and does marketing and owns her own business. And I go through just the people I meet, as I would say, on just a daily basis that I'm around. I am just always amazed at some of what people do, right? That you talk to and you don't even think about when you're talking to them, the things that they go do, that I'm blessed to be around on that front. In fact, I said I played and coached soccer for a long time. Well, you start looking at that pool of people that I've been out on the field that, as you get older, even when you play against them, you wind up being the same group of people that I've got to meet. And I feel very lucky because they're from all around the world, right? That it doesn't matter, but you start looking at the jobs some of those people do in big businesses, or the businesses they own themselves, and the experience, you begin to realize that, oh my gosh, there's this great amount of people that I don't think most people think about all the time, that they're probably friends with and do something because their kids go to school, or they're on a sports team, or you're out at private lessons on piano and you're doing stuff with people. That there's this great wealth of people that have some just phenomenal experiences, if you have the ability to tap into it, that you potentially have to talk through and look through. And so I guess, whether that is, dumb luck, as I say it lots of times, it just happened, or you've done work over the time. I'll still say, when you say, who am I with the most? Just because of what we're doing, right? There's still the most is a lot of my own staff or people that I'm working with at work, right? I would still go, when you ask, who am I there the most, just with what's happening, right? It's that, or probably my wife, right? Those are the people that I'm around the most. And I go, when you ask, I go, no, in some regards, I feel pretty lucky to be around some of them, right? Are they all the people that are the right people if I develop this thing into as big as what I am? I'm not sure of that. We'll all learn, just like I go with myself. Am I the right person to be part of that business too? As I ask every day, I'm not sure whether that's it, but we'll find out as we go. But I go, no, I hear that all the time, kind of about the people you're with and the books you read, and there is some absolute truth to that, right? That just by default, right, the things that they make you think about, or because just discussions you get into, and the people they know that they may be able to go, oh my gosh, just talk to them, they may be able to help, just helps broaden your horizons just incredibly well. So there is an awful lot of truth to both of those things, right? That both the people and the books that you read and have access to tend to change your perspective typically, or widen your perspective on what's going on.
Awesome. I love how you've talked about people through people, and that, that, right, it doesn't have to necessarily be the person that we know, but it could be the people that we know, right? And so that all just goes down to just networking in general, right? Making sure that we're open to the opportunities that come before us, and take that initiative of engaging in those conversations. And the law of attraction is another favorite perspective that I appreciate is, right, we're going to attract, if we have an open mind, we're going to attract the people and the situations and the circumstances that we need to grow into the better version of ourselves and have the successes that we want in our business. But we have to be open to what's being brought to us and say, oh yeah, that is an opportunity, or that is somebody that I need to have a conversation with, right? And you mentioned earlier, right, sometimes that's hard because we've got a problem in our business, right, and we're head down and we're in the weeds, and it's like, oh, but this thing just came to me that is maybe a conversation I need to have to solve this problem, but oh my goodness, I'm so busy in this challenge.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's as I would say, it's the hardest thing you have every day is, right, how do you pick your head up enough to make yourself look forward? Right, and it's really the bigger issue, right? How do you make it so your head doesn't have to be the one that's down all the time, right? That's really the question, right? That you have the opportunity to have your head up enough that you can see the opportunity of the people you should be talking to. And I actually believe that's the hardest part of transitioning your business.
Yes.
Right, is the ability to get your head up. The more you can, as you would say, keep your head up, looking forward as opposed to having to do it, which means you've got to have a team and processes in place, because you still have to do all that stuff, right? Somebody in your organization has to be taking care of the customers and the issues, and whatever those things are you do, that can't stop, right, just for you to pick your head up. But how do you get the business where you can pick your head up, that's going is, to me, I'll say every business owner's hardest thing to make themselves move forward to make that happen.
Yeah. And I agree. That's the thing I hear the most often as well. And part of that's because, right, is every business generally started out with just the business owner, right? Or just a couple people, and they did the do, right? And they became experts at doing the do, right? Working hard and working long and figuring things out and perfecting it. And then now that it's all figured out, it's like, hey, the business is now growing. But what generally happens is that the business will grow and then it'll plateau. And the reason that it plateaus is that it's not able to grow beyond the owner's capacity. And so, to your point, the biggest challenge for all successful business owners is transitioning from doer, right, to business owner, and finding the processes and the people and the disciplines and the structures and all of these things that'll enable them to go from doer to business owner and have a business that ultimately can run without them, to your point, so that they can pull out of the weeds and look at the big picture and the strategic direction of the organization, and who are the right people that we're going to need on the team in 5 years from now, and what are the different opportunities that's being presented to us. And yeah, so I hear that, multiple times a day is that struggle of how do I let go, right? I've tried it before. I can't find, the right people, or no one can do the job as well as me. Well, you alluded to it a few times. It's a process, right? You just don't flip a switch and say, oh, now I have a business that can run without me. No, it can be a long process of getting all those best practices put in place, and the owner too, right, has to have that mental transition of trusting in the team and knowing that the team's going to make mistakes and knowing that things aren't going to work out perfectly the first time, but it's all part of that journey of being able to scale.
Yep. Yeah. You have to be willing to let it go. And that's probably the hardest part, because it's typically your baby, right? Yes. And just like with your kids, it's hard to, just like you said, let them go do their own things and become their own people too in the process. And so, yes, it's one of the hardest parts of, as you scale up, especially if you were the doer in the scenario with what was there.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll appreciate this. One of the things I hear a lot is, well, it's just easier for me to do it myself. It'll take longer for me to teach them to do it than it will for me to just do it. Right?
It's true. And there are times that absolutely in the short term, that's true, right? It's not the long run, but in the short run, absolutely. You can always justify that it can take you less time to go do it.
Yeah. And again, you just said it again, the long-term versus short-term. So yes, long-term though, right? If they can do it for us, then we don't have to do it ourselves 20 times a month or, 15 times a day or whatever that happens to be. So the long-term benefit is if we get other people to take it off of our plate. Another way that I have people think about this is, based on your salary, what's your hourly wage, right? And then look at all the jobs that you're doing that are significantly below your hourly wage. And, so if you're doing a whole bunch of $25 an hour jobs and your hourly wage is 100, then you need to be delegating those things, right? Or outsourcing them, or, because the opportunity cost is huge in terms of what you could be doing and making versus doing those tasks.
I hope most of your clients are, when they do the hourly rate by what many hours they're working, are making 25 and $100 an hour, because I know there was a lot of times early in my business, it felt like I was making 5 and 10 and 50
right.
because of just the number of hours that were being put in. So I hope they're all around those numbers that are listening to this, because they're in pretty good boat if they're starting to get into those, moving their way forward.
Yeah. And to your point, that can be aspirational as well, right? Of what should your bill rate be versus right where the business is at. And obviously newer companies are right. We all have to, the hustle and grind is true, right? When we're in the first couple of years of our business, we all have to be doing the do and figuring things out. But the goal is to transition and move up what we call the entrepreneurial ladder, right? Where you're getting other people to do the do for you. So Joe, last question here is, if something catastrophic was to happen to the business, who's the first person you'd call, and what would that conversation be?
I think it really depends probably on where I'm physically at the time that it happens, but it'd probably either be my partner or my wife, just probably depending on where I'm at and who's closer and easier to get a hold of depending on what was happening. But it would be one of those two people.
Awesome. And I know it would depend on the situation, but what type of conversation would that be? What would you be looking for or needing in that conversation?
It's funny. As I've gotten older, I've realized it's not so much the answer you get, and it's not even so much when people, and it's more so coming to me, right? Most of the time when people are asking a question of you, they're verbalizing what's going on and the problem they have, and the fact that they can verbalize it and put it in, a majority of the time is allowing them typically to figure it out on their own, because that's been part of the problem.
Yes.
And I realize I do that way more than I think, right? That I'm talking through it, and it's allowing you to talk through it and just making a coherent sentence, right? And being able to explain it, even in your own mind, helps do it. So I'm not so sure most of the time. I think what you're really doing is hope you're getting a sympathetic ear to listen to it. Maybe there is some advice that comes with it, but more than that, somebody that can listen to it and allow you to put whatever rambling words and sentences together and allow you to grasp your head around it, I think is probably the first and foremost important thing you're hoping to get out of that when that happens.
Yeah. Awesome. So Joe, sounds like you've been blessed with some incredible people who have helped you along your journey. If they were all on the show here today, what would you want to say to them?
Thank you. Thank you. Glad they were around and glad they're part of my life.
Awesome. Now, Joe, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you and hearing all of your insights.
All right. Thank you very much for having me, Tim. Have a good day.
You too. To everyone who tuned in, thanks for listening to the Self-Made is a Myth show with your host, Coach Tim Kamsel. Be sure to help us spread this movement by liking the show and posting it on your social media channels. And to join our movement, go to bemadtogether.com. All right, folks, that's a wrap. Make sure to pay it forward, and we'll see you all next time. Take care.